Welcome back to We on Wild is One, and thank you for staying with us. I'm Eric Njoka. The headlines at this hour. US President Trump slaps 25% tariffs on imports from Japan and South Korea in his first letters to trading partners ahead of a deadline to reach a deal. Says the tariffs will apply from August 1st. At least 10 people killed, 29 others injured across Kenya during demonstrations to mark a historic protest day. The Kenyan National Commission on Human Rights says criminal gangs operated alongside police officers. President Trump's administration revokes the foreign terrorist organization designation for Al-Nusra Front, also known as HTS. A major step as Washington moves to ease sanctions on Syria. Brazilian President Lula da Silva hits back at President Donald Trump for interfering in coup case, says it will be dealt fairly and no one is above the law. This is Trump accused Brazil of carrying out a witch hunt against Bolsonaro. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian says in an interview that Israel, which last month fought a 12-day war with Iran, had attempted to assassinate him. Russian former Transport Minister Roman Starovoyt reportedly shot himself dead in Moscow suburb. This hours after being dismissed from his post. (2611) attack mastermind Tahawur Rana reveals key details during interrogation. Rana says he helped David Coleman Headley identify targets and admits to how he actively coordinated with the Lashkar-e-Taiba and Pakistan's spy agency, the ISI. Heads of state and government from member, partner and external engagement countries pause for a photo op at the BRICS summit in Rio de Janeiro. At least one person dead and several others injured in a cloudburst in Jammu and Kashmir's Poonch district. Heavy rains leave people stranded and road connectivity stopped.
Well, we're along the Guadalupe River right now, and you can see it's still rushing, not back within its original banks, but it is receding. That's the good news. This is an area where this water rose more than 20 feet in less than an hour. It reached all the way to the top of the hill and beyond, and getting into areas where it was just too much for residents to bear.
The force of that water was so insane. Nobody could get into it. That my resident, that was the one that called 911. He was trying to get to the family and all the way to water, all the way to his waist, and debris hitting him. And he was yelling, "Please throw me your baby," and they couldn't, and they got swept away.
Looking across the other side now, you can see these trees that were snapped. They're pushed over like a row of dominoes, just lining the entire river here. The damage is overwhelming. It stretches for miles. This is the kind of area that rescue and recovery teams are working through right now while keeping an eye on the sky because the forecast calls for more rain today. The potential for flooding, not like we've seen so far, but still enough to cause problems in an area that already has all it can deal with. That's the latest right now from Kerrville, Texas.
Let's head to Japan, where more than 1,500 earthquakes have rocked a small island region since June 21st, leaving residents exhausted and uncertain about what comes next. The hardest hit area, Akuseki Island, was struck by a 5.1 magnitude quake overnight, but according to local officials, there has been no major physical damage reported. Still, the relentless tremors have taken a toll. Nearly half of Akuseki's 89 residents have evacuated to the regional hub of Kagoshima, and others from nearby islands have also fled. Local Mayor Genichiro Kubo says the tremors are causing significant stress.
Evacuations on a voluntary basis have been taking place. First on 4th of July, 13 people, followed by 6th July, 31 people left Akuseki Island, in total 44. As for Kodakara Island, 15 people were transported to Kagoshima on a ferry.
The weekend evacuation was part of the country's voluntary basis evacuation plan. One evacuee told rescuers that he was praying for the safety of those who decided to stay and for the earthquakes to stop.
It's a relief that we can evacuate to a place where it is safe. I pray for the safety of those who decided to stay and also for the earthquakes to stop soon.
This is not the first time the region has faced such turmoil. A similar episode occurred just last November, that is September, when 346 quakes were recorded. The recent waves of earthquakes in the region comes days after Japan braced for a massive quake predicted by a manga artist on 5th of July, which later turned out to be a false alarm. But the current swarm has also triggered a wave of disinformation and misinformation, particularly online. Some foreign tourists have reportedly delayed travel to Japan, citing unfounded fears that a catastrophic quake is imminent. Fueling the panic was a viral manga comic reissued in 2021, which incorrectly predicted doomsday on July 5th. Japan, of course, is no stranger to seismic activities, sitting atop 4 tectonic plates in the Pacific Ring of Fire. The country experiences around 1,500 quakes every year, nearly 18% of the world's total.
It was around 4:30 or 5 in the morning. I was asleep with my wife, but we heard a noise. I had a blanket on top of me. When I opened the blanket, the lion jumped on top of me. We had a long struggle, and I shouted for help. It bit my legs, bit my neck. I grabbed it by the neck and choked it. It ran away 10 meters.
जो वाइल्ड लाइफ के हमारे जो इनके एसओपीज़ हैं हमने उसके मुताबिक शेर रखा हुआ है, ठीक है, जो कि हमने उनके एसओपीज़ को मतलब पूरा किया हुआ है और हमने आपने देखा होगा कि कोई ऐसी जगह नहीं है जहां से वो बाहर आ सकता और बड़ा पायदार हमने ये बनाया हुआ उसके लिए। लेकिन वो जिस दिन का ये वकूआ है उस दिन वो सफाई किया लड़के ने, करने के बाद वो इसको ना ताला लगाना भूल गया, ठीक है, वो किसी काम में बिज़ी हो गया। जैसे ही उसने मौका पाया वो बाहर आया, बाहर आकर उसने दीवार फलांगी है और उसके बाद वो बाहर जाके उसने हल्की फुल्की खराशें कहने के बच्चों को आई हैं।
An SUV slammed into a strip mall, sparking a massive explosion and fire as the collision ruptured a gas line. The chaotic scene caught on camera in Harriman, Utah, about 30 minutes from Salt Lake City. Here's more of the dramatic footage. Flames engulfed the SUV as shocked bystanders looked on. But 2 people did not merely watch. Firefighters say 2 Good Samaritans ran toward the SUV minutes before the explosion and pulled out the driver and passenger. In another stroke of good fortune, the building was empty. 3 people were hospitalized from the initial 3-vehicle crash, but not from the explosion. No firefighters got hurt. More than 60 responded, but none were near the building when it blew. The explosion destroyed a Domino's and caused significant damage to 2 neighboring businesses. Fire officials initially evacuated the area out of caution, but lifted that order hours later. Harriman's mayor praised first responders and thanked the community for stepping up in a moment of crisis.
The situation is escalating. Kenya's national rights watchdog said Monday that at least 10 people died during the latest protests in the country, with around 30 injured nationwide. Kenya has been rocked by a new wave of protests against William Ruto's government for the past month, with the initial movement having started in August last year.
People who killed our young people in the last year maandamanos, they have not been brought to account for their actions. They are continuing to perpetrate murder against their citizens. A government that has turned itself into a terrorist unit against its own people must not be called a government.
Monday marked a particularly significant day for the demonstrations. Known as Saba Saba, it represents the 35th anniversary of protests that eventually led to Kenya's transition to democracy. The ongoing anti-government protests were also fueled by the death of blogger Albert Ojwang in police custody last month, drawing attention to law enforcement methods and brutality. We wanted peaceful demonstrations, but now tear gas is all over. We can't work. We are being shot with bullets. Ruto should humble himself and listen to Gen Z. Ahead of the protests on Monday, police attempted to block major roads leading into the capital and seal off the city centre. A move that did not deter the protesters, nor slow down the growth of discontent in the country. These parcels of food are a lifeline for civilians in South Sudan. As fighting rages in the Upper Nile region, the World Food Programme has started airdropping humanitarian aid to prevent a famine. It is the first humanitarian aid in 4 months that the organisation has delivered to the region.
Livelihoods have been destroyed, people have been displaced, and now people are at a real risk of famine because of the conflict. These airdrops that we've started over the last couple of days are crucial and critical to push back that risk and bring people back from the brink of famine.
According to World Food Programme estimates, more than 1 million people in Upper Nile face acute hunger.
The majority are women and children and people with special needs, including the elderly. They have come here with nothing, without food, without shelter. The only things that they have, some of them are a little bundle of clothes that are tied in some clothes that they have. They have nothing else in their possession.
Fighting between armed groups in Upper Nile broke out last February. The country is also facing growing political instability, leading the United Nations to warn that it could soon be the site of another civil war.
Measles has been considered eliminated in the United States for more than 2 decades now. But despite that, new cases continue to surge. So far in 2025, there have been more than 1,200 confirmed cases across 38 states, with the most being in Texas, the epicenter of this outbreak. That has surpassed the last major measles outbreak of 2019, when 1,274 cases were reported in the entire year. So far, 3 deaths have been confirmed to be linked to the current outbreak. More than half the cases are in children 19 and younger, and nearly all cases, 92%, are in people who were not vaccinated against the virus or whose vaccination status was unknown, according to the CDC. The agency says 1 in 5 of those who contract measles require hospitalization. This comes amid a decline in measles vaccination rates nationwide. A study released last month by Johns Hopkins University looked at more than 2,000 counties in 33 states across the United States and found 78% saw a drop in vaccination rates.
US President Donald Trump is threatening to impose an additional 10% tariffs on nations that align themselves with what he called the anti-American policies of the BRICS bloc of emerging economies. At last year's BRICS summit, hosted by Russia in Kazan, the Kremlin initiated efforts to develop alternatives to US-dominated payment systems. As the group meets again in Brazil, the focus is on less controversial issues, such as promoting trade relations between members and global health. BRICS was founded by Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, but the group last year expanded to include Indonesia, Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia and the UAE. Because of that rapid expansion, housekeeping issues are topping the agenda this year to better integrate new members and boost internal cohesion. The summit also offers an opportunity for members to respond to Trump's tariffs by seeking alternatives and diversifying economic partnerships.
Moving on for now, the Russian President Vladimir Putin has claimed that the BRICS alliance has overtaken the G7 in global economic weight, saying BRICS now accounts for nearly half the world's population and 40% of the global economy. Speaking remotely at the BRICS summit held in Brazil, Putin praised the expanding influence of BRICS. He also emphasized on the role of member countries in the current geopolitical situation. Listen to this.
Let me emphasize that the BRICS countries represent different models of development, religion, unique civilization and culture. And at the same time, they all advocate equality and good neighborliness, the priority of traditional values, high ideals of friendship and harmony, and strive to make a significant contribution to ensure.
And to prove his point, Putin referred to the IMF data from 2025, stating that combined GDP figures for the G7 are $57 trillion, whereas BRICS already stands at $77 trillion. He also called on the BRICS countries to step up cooperation in a range of areas, including natural resources, logistics, trade, and finance.
It is necessary to further expand the use of national currencies in mutual payments. The creation of an independent settlement and depository system within BRICS would, it appears, enable faster, more efficient and secure currency transactions. Incidentally, the use of national currencies in trade between our countries has been steadily increasing.
Earlier, BRICS had issued a statement saying that the bloc comprising countries including Brazil, Russia, India, China had serious concerns about the rise of unilateral tariff and non-tariff measures which distort trade, quote unquote. It further said that these were inconsistent with the rules of the World Trade Organization. On the other hand, US President Donald Trump has issued yet another tariff threat. He said that any country aligning themselves with the anti-American policies of BRICS will be charged an additional 10% tariff, quote unquote. He also added that no exceptions to this policy will be made. And speaking on the matter, the US Treasury Secretary said that countries don't make trade talks with America by August 1 can expect tariff rates to return to the levels announced in April.
Of a pause, because I think what's happened is there's a lot of congestion going into the home stretch, and as part of the trade team, what's great about having President Trump on side is he's created maximum leverage. So by telling our trading partners that they could boomerang back to the April 2nd date, I think it's really going to move things along the next couple of days and weeks.
And responding to that, the Kremlin said that the BRICS group of nations had never been working to undermine other countries.
Мы действительно видели такие заявления президента Трампа. Но здесь очень важно отметить, что уникальность такого объединения, как БРИКС, заключается в том, что это объединение стран, которые разделяют общие подходы и общее мировоззрение того, как нужно осуществлять сотрудничество, исходя из собственных интересов. И это взаимодействие в рамках БРИКС никогда не было и не будет направлено против каких-то третьих стран.
And on the diplomatic front as well, BRICS seems to be standing out in a way with its unequivocal condemnation of the Pahalgam terror attack in India, military strikes of Israel and America on Iran, or the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Just for context here, the BRICS was founded by Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa last year. It expanded to include Indonesia, Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia and the UAE. And as per reports, BRICS represented over 1/3 of the world's economic growth based on purchasing power parity, and is fast emerging as a bloc for multilateral diplomacy amid violent conflicts and rising tension of the trade wars as well. The question is, will it truly emerge as a viable alternative to platforms like the G7 and the G20 groups of major economies, driven by the agenda of the West, by prioritizing the needs of the global South? Only time will tell.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu heads to the White House today. His first visit since the United States and Israel jointly struck Iran's nuclear sites. But this time, the focus is on Gaza. Netanyahu and President Trump could announce a long-awaited ceasefire deal, a 60-day pause in fighting that would see Hamas release some hostages. There are still about 50 captives in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. Hamas has signaled early interest, but talks in Qatar are still underway, with key sticking points such as whether the deal will lead to a permanent end to the war. Pressure is building on both sides. Israel has lost 20 soldiers in Gaza in the last month, and protests are growing, both from families of hostages and critics of the war's soaring toll. More than 56,000 Palestinians have died since Hamas launched its October 2023 attack.
At a meeting with his Ethiopian counterpart Abiy Ahmed, Chinese Premier Li Qiang said the two countries are ready to work together to expand bilateral trade and investment and promote the sustainable development of the Addis Ababa-Djibouti railway. The two men met on the sidelines of the BRICS summit in Brazil on Sunday. Li said Ethiopia and China are both important countries in the global south, and he vowed to strengthen cooperation between the nations within multilateral groups such as the United Nations and BRICS. Bilateral trade between the two countries reached just under $5 billion last year, up from $3 billion in 2014. The trade surplus remains vastly in China's favour, but Ethiopian coffee exporters are hoping to benefit from China's zero-tariff policy for African nations, announced last month. Abiy thanked Beijing for its consistent support and said he's looking forward to working with China to bolster cooperation in trade, industry, tourism, and other areas.
Israel's military has launched a series of airstrikes targeting Yemen's Houthi rebels. These strikes overnight hit port areas as well as a power plant in Yemen, and the Houthis then responded with 2 missiles being fired into Israel. The Israeli military says they tried to intercept those missiles, but there were impacts there, though rescue officials say there were no injuries. All this is coming after a spectacular attack the day before in the Red Sea that saw gunmen shoot machine guns, launch rocket-propelled grenades, and even supposedly use bomb-carrying drone boats to attack this ship, setting it on fire. The crew on that vessel, which is flagged out of Liberia, ended up having to abandon the ship. They were picked up later by another passing ship. But it just shows just how dangerous the situation remains in the Red Sea, which had been targeted by a months-long campaign by the Houthi rebels. This is also coming as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel travels to Washington to speak to President Donald Trump. The Israel-Hamas war, as well as the recent U.S. and Israeli airstrikes on Iran's nuclear program, likely will come up in those discussions. But with these attacks overnight, the Houthis likely will be a point of contention as well.